I think the mental game of open-handed is just awesome. I mean, you're talking about courage, faith, embracing fear, having faith in your own uniqueness.
I don't know what the future holds for us, but I see great hope in pushing this art form to a place that I probably cannot even imagine.
You know, it can turn out as a nice surprise sometimes if you put your left hand on the hi-hat.
You know, some people, they think that when you say open-handed playing, it means leading with the left side, but it actually means leading with both sides, and that's the magic of it.
It's not like everybody who's open-handed playing starts to sound the same. If anything, they all discover new levels of their playing and they all sound differently. This is really where the journey begins.
Hi everybody, this is Chris Lesso and welcome to the LTR podcast. This is about improving your drumming and bulletproofing your mindset. If you haven't done so already, please go to iTunes and rate the podcast, and that's so other people can find us. And if you haven't done so already as well, please go to chrislesso.com and sign up for the email list, and you'll get all the free content that I'm putting out, and hopefully we can connect, and that will show where I'm at and what I'm doing. So welcome to the LTR podcast. That stands for Life Through Rhythm, and this is about improving our mindset, improving our drumming. There's so many connections between drumming and life, and we've got a great one today. This is on open-handed drumming, one of my favorite subjects and one of the biggest impacts on myself as a person and myself as a drummer. So what is this? What is open-handed drumming? Basically, it means not crossing your hands. Not crossing your hands. Who came up with the idea to cross your hands in the first place? I think this goes back to the origins of the instrument and how it evolved from the marching drumming aspect and using traditional grip and that kind of thing. And the drum set is really only a little over a century old. So it is still evolving, and it is a very young instrument. So I really believe open-handed drumming is really the future of the instrument. And right now, very few people are doing it. And I really want to help push this idea out there and push the art form forward and get as many people doing this as possible. Now, when you start doing this right away, you're going to notice two improvements in your overall expression. One is your weaker side will improve. It's guaranteed to improve. And imagine having two right hands on the drum set. What would you come up with? What would your expression, what new levels would it hit? It's so cool to think of it that way. Now, the other benefit of it is our expression goes up, our creativity goes up. The new ideas that we will come up with will be almost limitless. Think of a drummer like Steve Gadd and what he came up with the groove 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover with Paul Simon. So open-handed drumming is really about those two things and a certain mindset that is going to also be used when we're trying to improve our craft. And that mindset is one of courage. So having the courage to be different and be ourselves. Because when you play open-handed, you are going to ironically sound a lot more like you. And it takes a lot of courage to be completely authentic and vulnerable and come up with ideas that are a lot more unique than just being like everybody else and just doing things that have been already done before. The other mindset that this will bring out in you is going into discomfort, going to the path of most resistance. And I think this is so effective in life and in drumming. If you're pushing yourself to be better, and I love the word kaizen, and that's a Japanese word that means constant and never-ending improvement. So if we're constantly working on our weaknesses and constantly going into discomfort a little bit every day consistently, this can be massive in life and of course in our craft of drumming or whatever we do. And one thing that I learned from my mentor, Don Famularo, who's going to be on this podcast, this is amazing, is the concept of the path of most resistance always leads to the most amount of growth. So in life, if you see my computer, I've actually got my mouse on my left-hand side. I try to open doors with my left hand because I'm naturally right-handed, so my weaker side is my left hand. If you see me eating sushi, I'm using my left hand and I've got soy sauce running down my face and onto my shirt, but I don't care because I'm working my weaker side. And I'm constantly trying to challenge that weaker side because I know that when it comes to expressing myself, I'm going to be all the stronger for it because I've been working on my weaknesses and finding those little chinks in the armor. So my story with open-handed drumming is I played 17 years crossed, just like everybody else. And I had a drum teacher when I was about 15, and he just said, like maybe most of us, this is how it's done. This is always how it's been done. Do it this way. And I just didn't have a choice. I just did it the way that he did it. And I played with my right hand, crossed like the way that most people do it. And I found that my stronger hand, my right hand, got better and better, and my weaker hand stayed pretty weak. And this went on for about 17 years, and I was trying my best to become better and better. And my teacher and mentor, Don Famularo, I saw him at the COSA camp in New York State in about the late 90s and early 2000s. And he had been playing 37 years cross-handed. And what I saw at that time was he took a hacksaw to his hi-hat and sawed off the rod at the top and sawed off the bar at the bottom. So this meant the hi-hat could only go as high as the snare. So it basically forces your left hand to play the hi-hat. There's no crossing. That hi-hat can't go up and you can't get your right hand to it. And he also added a hi-hat to his right side. So anything that he played crossed, he just played with his right hand on the right and his left hand on the left. And I saw him pushing himself in front of audiences and in performances that he was doing at that time. And basically, he was burning the boats. He was not giving himself any option but to force his weaker side to improve and grow his self-expression and push himself into a place of extreme discomfort and fearlessly doing it, not staying where it's safe, going to where it's uncomfortable. And I saw this and seeing him with that sawed off hi-hat was just so moving to me and inspired. He wasn't going 10% or 20% in, he was going like 1,000% into that. And this really inspired me to do this myself. And I remember Dom saying to me, Chris, don't think of yourself 6 months from now, think of yourself 6 years from now, where you'll be. Envision your future self. Who do you want to be and who do you want to become? And imagine the possibilities. You're walking into the realm of possibility. If you stay where it's safe, you think 6 years down the road, you're going to be basically the same and not much growth. Think of someone like Miles Davis, and he did that time and time again. He'd have a successful formula and a successful band, and he would just almost sabotage himself and start from scratch and go where it was go into discomfort. And time passes, and look at the amount of growth and the possibilities that he explored. It's just mind-blowing and so inspiring. So that was my exposure to open-handed drumming, and that was about 2002. Now it's been about 15 years since then, and about 14, just going on 15 years, and it's just really blown the doors wide open. And I can only imagine if I had played open-handed since I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old when I just started. So that's why now when I teach, I empower my students with playing with both hands. So the mindset of going into courage, being fearless, being authentic, and going into your unique self-expression while working on the weaker side, I empower them with this. And then if they want to cross, they can, because crossing feels a certain way. It's kind of cool. all our heroes like John Bonham and Neil Peart and all those drummers, they played cross, so nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything is wrong with cross. But if any teachers are listening to this, I really think empowering your younger students with the open-handed drumming and the open-handed mindset has some amazing ramifications as time passes. And there's a great quote by Henry Adams, and it says, "A teacher affects eternity. No one can tell where their influence stops." So as you teach this, even if you play cross yourself, you can really empower your students by example. It's a powerful concept. So let's get into it. Dom Famularo, like I said, he's a crazy New Yorker. I've known him for many years. He's my teacher and mentor. He's known as the global ambassador of drumming. And he was on the cover of Modern Drummer. He has a background studying with so many of the greats of our craft, like Jim Chapin and Joe Morello. He has inspired so many people literally around the globe and continues to do it with boundless energy. I just saw him in Indianapolis at PASIC. He travels to many countries every year. He has boundless energy. He is driven to inspire. And what I love about Dom as well is Dom the businessman, Dom the person, and Dom the artist. He works on them all equally. And who we are as our character improves is also who we are as a drummer. So I'm really inspired by Dom to work on not only my drumming and my craft, but on myself as a person. And he really inspires people around the world to do this as well. So you'll be inspired listening to him today. Klaus Hessler from Germany. I think of Klaus as almost a doctor or a scientist of the drums. He's just one of the most incredible and musical players I've ever seen in my life. I think he's got one foot in history, in knowing so much about the history of rudiments and the history of the drum set. He studied 25 years with Mr. Jim Chapin. That is incredible. Think about that, 25 years with Jim Chapin. But he's also got one foot firmly planted in the future of this instrument. So he also plays open-handed, and I love the way that he is fearlessly standing on the edge of the cliff of the evolution of this instrument and himself as a person. His latest project is his band Flux, and his new book is called Camp Duty Update, and he also has Open-Handed Drumming Volumes 1 and 2, and also a fantastic DVD called Drumming Carols. We're also welcoming Stéphane Chamberlain from Quebec City and also New York City. And Stéphane is fantastic. He's a good friend of mine, fantastic drummer, big inspiration to me. Just to give you an idea of the grit and passion for drumming and learning that Stéphane has, he traveled to Dom's studio on Long Island once a month for 9 years. Now that is a 12-hour drive one way. That is mind-blowing. If people come to my studio and they complain that the TTC was a little slow, think about a 12-hour drive from Quebec City to Long Island. That is awesome, and that is so inspiring to me. And he did that for 9 years. That is awesome. Now, Stéphane is an amazing educator, fantastic drummer, and he has infectious enthusiasm for what he does. He's also got some great books out called Pedal Control, Weaker Side, and Drum Set Duets. And that's on Wisdom Media, co-written with Dom Famularo. Those are some great books. I use them with a lot of my students. So let's get into it. This is our round table with Dom, Stéphane, Klaus, and myself on open-handed drumming. Enjoy this and be inspired.
Well, first of all, I want to introduce Casual T. That's Casual-T. Casual T is a student of mine. This is Chris, Klaus, and Stefan, who you know who they are. And Casual T is originally from Vienna, I guess, right? From Vienna, Austria.
Where it's from.
And living now in Brooklyn. He's been studying with me a little bit over a year now. And Casual T is a natural open-handed player. He's a righty by just, naturally being a righty, but had been playing open-handed all of his life, and then came to me for lessons to understand more about some challenges that he can overcome to even take him to the next level. So it's been kind of interesting now that I meet these wonderful players that are now been playing open-handed since the beginning. So what we're experiencing now is the changeover of artists that have made the change, and now we're starting to see people that are just starting that way because it just makes more sense. And for me, it began in my meeting with Billy Cobham back in the early 80s. I actually met, where I started touring with him. I met Billy in actually the late 60s, Billy living on Long Island, and Billy was taking lessons with a dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Al Miller. And Al Miller was just the top rudimental and drum set teacher on Long Island, and Billy had known Al, so we kind of met through Al Miller. So then I end up signing with Tama Drums. Billy was with Tama Drums in the early 80s. They put us together to do some tours, and our first tour together with Billy was 27 cities in 28 days. So you talk about baptism by fire. Bring it on. We get in there, we hit it. So now I begin to see Billy close up at his best. And it was Billy that in 1959, who was a natural right-handed drummer as it was, began to realize that this cross-stick playing was challenging him. So in 1959, with his teacher at the time, he just made the change to play open-handed, lowered the hi-hat, started playing that way. And when his teacher said, "Gee, Billy, this is wrong with what you're doing," Billy said, "Well, okay, then it's wrong, but it feels better." So Billy had the courage to continue with it, going down this path of having everyone else in the industry telling him it was wrong, but Billy still having the drive to say, there's something there. So Billy stayed with it. And he basically developed his left side to be equal to his right. So in that process, it was amazing. I do several tours with Billy in the early 80s. The next one they put me on tour with is Simon Phillips. Simon Phillips, who is again a natural righty who plays open-handed, was highly influenced by Billy Cobham in the early days when Simon came from England and saw Billy playing with Mahavishnu. Next thing I know, I'm with Simon and I see Simon playing open-handed, and Simon's a natural righty. So now here I am on tour. The first tour they put together was 26 cities in 28 days. So it was, again, the intent that if you're traveling together, you're living together, you're setting up together, you're playing together. I would go on and do my thing. Simon and Billy would do their thing. Then we'd play together. So I had the chance of really being able to see this advantage of how they played. And I was at the time still playing cross-handed playing. So it wasn't until I then started reading books about, Einstein. Einstein is this incredible mind that was voted the greatest mind of the 20th century. I didn't know much about Albert Einstein. I start reading books about him. It's in the year 2000. He was voted as the greatest mind in the 20th century. I'm reading books on Einstein, and there was a quote that someone had asked Einstein. A journalist asked Einstein a quote that said, "Mr. Einstein, how have you been able to open up your mind to have all these ideas?" Because out of the mind of Einstein, the atomic power was created, nuclear power, fluorescent lights, X-rays for hospitals. Out of Einstein's thought process of his theory of relativity came all these other inventions, and people are still inventing things. Einstein died in the mid-50s. So what's amazing about it is that his mind opened up. So the journalist asked him, "Mr. Einstein, how have you been able to open up your mind this way?" And Einstein responded by saying, "You cannot solve new challenges with old solutions." You cannot solve new challenges with old solutions. Well, I felt that in the music industry, the music was changing. We had all these new challenges with equipment changing and drum sets getting bigger and different and more creative, that I was still using this old solution trying to play these new challenges. So on the plane, on a flight to Hamburg, Germany, for Udo Dahmen, who's a phenomenal teacher and professor in Germany, we're going to play the World Drum Festival. And on that flight, I said, I'm changing. I really believe open-handed playing is the solution I need to face these new challenges. So on the flight to Germany, I then commit to myself, I'm going for it. I arrive at the event. We're all setting up with drums. We've got tons of artists there, well-known artists that are there. And we're all setting up. And I asked the drum tech, he said, "Mr. Famularo, we have all of your drums here. What else do you need?" I said, "I need a hacksaw." A hacksaw is a saw that cuts metal. He said, "Well, I think I can get one." I said, "Go get me a hacksaw." So he leaves and comes back within 10 minutes with this saw. So He said, what are you going to do with it? So I take out a Sharpie from my pocket and I mark the rod for my hi-hat and the tube that had to be cut. I take them and I start cutting this hi-hat. I lay it across my drum seat and I'm cutting this freaking hi-hat stand, right? So the tech gets nervous and says, Mr. Famularo, just so you know, that's a new hi-hat stand. And I looked at him and I said, not anymore. And I kept on cutting. Cut it down just like what you saw at Kosa. By cutting it down and having it and being able to lower the hi-hat without having that long rod in the way of other cymbals that I wanted to put closer, it totally changed my setup. By putting my ride cymbal on my left, now I have two ride cymbals right and left and two hi-hats. So even if I play right-handed lead, it's still open-handed. Open-handed just means don't cross. And that's been the process. So then, as I'm going on and experiment with this, I think back of my early lessons with Klaus Hessler, and Klaus was doing this 20 years before I was even getting into it. Klaus started dabbling into this here and started to see where this could go. So Klaus really became the next person that I felt embraced this open-handed, philosophy, which is really what it is, about bringing your weaker side to an equal side, if not more. Now, I was on a performance in Diest, Belgium, with Greg Bissonette and Simon Phillips. And we're having dinner together, the three of us, myself, Simon, and Greg Bissonette. And Greg turns to Simon and says, Simon, but with all your years of playing open-handed, is your left hand equal to your right hand? Because you're a natural righty. And Simon says, no, my left hand is not equal. And all of a sudden, in the insanity of that, Greg looks up and says, you mean after all of these years, your left hand is not equal to your right hand? And Simon says, no, my left hand is better. and Greg basically fell off of his chair. It was hysterical. And that's really kind of what has happened here. You start to see changes in yourself physically that opens up opportunities that leads to players like yourself, Chris, with what you're doing, for sure with Klaus, and now Stefan, as we finally got Stefan to make the decision to make the move, it was powerful. And with someone like Casual T, who's been doing it all of his life, because he felt like Cobham, it just makes more sense.
I've seen it in my own students, and maybe Casual T has had this challenge as well, is you have to go against the tide, against the convention. I've heard a lot of people saying it's wrong. Even well-meaning parents of students that, sometimes young kids just pick up the sticks and they start playing, I'm going to hit that there, I'm going to hit that there. And their parents go, actually, this is the correct way. And they start playing like that. And, kind of tying their hand behind their back, figuratively speaking. I think that handicaps a lot of people from a young age in thinking of a correct way. And I really, when I teach, I never like to use that word correct. And since we've talked about Billy Cobham being a pioneer, I have to acknowledge Gary Chester, because just like what you were saying about going against the convention of the time and kind of thinking, well, what can maximize creativity on this amazing instrument? If you look at this book, The New Breed, which everybody has, and if you haven't, check it out. And there's this page of what Gary called territorial rights, and you can see the left side and the right side, and he talks about that, how it had an advantage in his expression in doing a lot of studio drumming. He had 3 hi-hats, 2 floor toms, and he was one of the pioneers in this.
Right?
And Gary, I knew Gary. Gary was a friend of mine for many, many years. Gary lived not that far from me in the New York and Westchester area. And interesting with Gary is Gary was influenced by 2 people when he wrote that book. Jim Chapin, because of the independence that Jim Chapin's book had showcased in a jazz setting, and he wanted to bring that level of independence into a more of a rock setting, and Billy Cobham. And Gary came to several of the clinics that Billy and I did when we played together on those tours, and we'd get together and sit down and talk about it. And Gary really saw the advantage of what this was about and where the future of drumming was going. Wow. And Gary taught many, many great students, the Dave Weckels and the Joel Rosenblatts and so many other great, great drummers that have great understanding of independence and freedom through Gary's vision, which is great.
Klaus, and this was the case with you, Klaus?
You say what was the case with me?
Yeah, how you naturally found your way to playing open-handed, even though you are right-handed.
Yes, I am right-handed, but before I tell you a little bit about my personal story, how I got to play open-handed, first of all, what we have to understand is that being right-handed or being left-handed, that's not a black and white thing. There's many left-handed people who have no idea what to do with their right hand, and there's left-handed people who are very close to being ambidextrous, and the same applies to right-handed people. So there's many different shadings of say individual skills and individual physical order, say when it comes to being right or left-handed. That's one thing. And also what is important is to understand that being right-handed doesn't say that you're right-footed, or being left-handed does not say that you're left-footed, which is a very important part of our game, since pretty much your choice of which foot you play your bass drum with, that pretty much dictates the logistics of your drum kit. And that is forgotten many times. So, I mean, that to start with. The other thing is that when I started playing drums somewhere around age of 4, we had a set of drums in the basement of my parents' house. But this set of drums just consisted, in the first place, only of a bass drum, a snare, a rag tom, and a cymbal. There was not anything else. So I sat down and started to play without knowing anything. I did not have a teacher. Maybe, thank God. Who knows? I'm just guessing. Yeah? But of course, the cymbal was attached to the bass drum, so there was a rod coming out of the bass drum where the cymbal was placed on. So I had no other choice than playing the cymbal with my right hand and playing the snare with my left hand. That was pretty much it, because there was no such thing as a cymbal stand that you could move to different places. It was a rod that came out of the bass drum. Okay, so couple of months later, my father, who played in the local brass band, he brought back a hi-hat from the drum set of the local brass band. They had gotten a new one, and the old stuff was somewhere flying around, and they didn't need it anymore. So he brought that and said, now son, you have a hi-hat here. So how about that? And I was so happy about this thing, and I started playing open-handed because that thing was standing on the left side. So before that, I kind of had learned to play the cymbal with my right hand. Now I was learning to play the hi-hat with my left hand, and it felt very natural to me. It was never anything like being awkward or this is not it. It was just the way it is, and I went with the flow. And it was only much later, when I had my first formal lesson at, say, around age of 10, where the teacher would tell me, "Oh, that's kind of not the way how things are done, you know. It should be this and not this." So I said, "Oh boy, I'm getting into trouble here." But on the way home on my bicycle, I was already trying to remember what was the position like. And I went back to my own little drum set, and I couldn't remember if he was saying this is the way or this is. I just didn't know. And after that, I was also getting a little bit into cross-handed playing. But for sure, I mean, people like Cobham, that's something that you just cannot miss. But again, the initial spark came from Dom back in '93, I should say. And yeah, so Dom was saying, "Boy, why don't you switch back?" And there's so much to discover. That was basically the line. And just as I had done with Chapin, I just gave it a try. I didn't ask why or when or what. I just did it. It could have been completely wrong, and we would now not sit together. But it was one of the best decisions that I ever took. Although I have to say, it was not my decision. The fault goes to Dom. So.
But actually, it goes back to Chapin, because when Klaus had come to me, he was recommended to come to me by Chapin when Klaus had taken some lessons with Jim. And Jim had said to me, he said, "Boy, I got this phenomenal student in Germany, Klaus Hessler, who really has absorbed molar at the highest level quickly. So it was amazing to kind of see how great Klaus embraced this technique, which gave him even more freedom with his hands. So when Klaus came to me, I then just kind of brought Klaus into this whole Gladstone stone molar, lineage of what it was. And Klaus really was one of the first that really kind of captured the entire picture, grabbed it, and ran with it at such a high level. And to see the freedom that he had already in his hands, I just kept on saying, my gosh, if he takes that with open-handed, this could lead incredibly well, because I see cross-handed players as playing, but they have a crutch. A crutch is that stick that you put under your arm when you break a leg and you're walking. And it's kind of like I see these cross-handed players running in the race. They're winning the race, but they're running with a crutch. So my theory is, my gosh, what would happen if they played open-handed and removed the crutch? How much more would they win the race? And that's kind of what I saw with Klaus. That's what I also saw with Stefan. Stefan, when he absorbed these techniques, he came to me at a very young age. And when he came to me at a young age, driving 12 hours one way to come to a lesson here on Long Island, staying for a couple of days, and I would hammer him and beat him up for 8 hours a day, and then throw him on a bus like a wet rag and send him back up to Quebec City, Canada. And when he began to get these techniques and really began to open up his mind, coming from Quebec. And in Quebec, there was more like an older view of what drum education was like. Everybody was kind of using the same old couple books, and they were all playing this way. So when Stefan began to open up with these techniques and see where that's going, that's why I kept pushing him. I said, Steph, I think you've got a really great left hand that could lead you to a place that I still think you have no idea how much more this will open you up until you take the step and the risk and the courage to go down that path. And there will still be people telling you, what the heck are you doing? But I really believe it is this wave that we're creating from Cobham and through Simon and through guys like Carter Beauford and Rayford Griffin and these wonderful players that have played this way, that have now taken us being the next generation forward into the 21st century, which is making massive change. And Stefan embraced it wonderfully well.
The question, what if, is such a powerful question. I think that's what really seduced me into, like I said, looking into the future. Like, what if? What is, looking to see the future you 10 years down the road, and what are you capable of, and tapping into, all that potential you have, because we're really here for such a short time. And if everybody is familiar with something called the Fosbury Flop, and there was a athlete named Dick Fosbury, and he was a high jumper, and he used to jump over in a certain kind of in a certain kind of technique, and he had his own way of doing it, and he was ridiculed and made fun of, and just said, what are you doing? Do it the way it's always been done. Do it the way, stick with tradition. This is the way we do it. And he went against the tide, like you said, having the courage to really take a risk and trust his intuition. And now they teach it in schools to grade 2s and grade 3s, and it's named after him, the Fosbury Flop. I think that's so cool. And I think there's a bit of a correlation there with people trusting their intuition. And Stefan has such an amazing book called The Weaker Side, which I bring all my students through, and it's just superb. And that is really what a big part of what open-handed is all about, is what if you had, as Dom says, what if you had two right hands? I love looking at it like that. So Stefan, could you get into a little bit of what was the turning point for you in playing this way?
My story with open-handed playing, I guess the first time, and it's a very clear memory for me. I was in the drum shed with Dom, and maybe Dom, you remember that. And I was just playing some of the exercises you gave me, the month before, and I was so proud of myself, playing everything well. And Dom said something like, "This is huge, great. Now let's switch." And I was like, what? You really want me to switch and lead with my left hand? I was not sure about that. And part of the reasons why I wasn't sure. I was playing cross-sticking since I was like 3 years old. So for a long time, I was mastering this position right here. So it was scary, really, really scary to change my approach. So thinking of this concept as a change was kind of too scary for me. So I had to kind of change my belief. I guess the way I went about open-handed playing was more like it's an addition. It's something that I'm going to add, to my playing. So I started playing leading with the left side and never leaving my strength, with my right side. So that being said, after many years now, it's hard to come back like this, and I did the same thing, guys. I cut my hat, and as you can see right here, I use 2 hats on my left side. So it's really, really cool to go from left to right and explore all the things that I can't play like this, So after a while, I think it was like 4 years ago, Klaus played at PASIC, the PASIC show, and I was impressed. That was, for me, that was also like my lessons with Dom, of course. It was a very important moment to, the change, but watching and enjoying Klaus's performance was also a very important moment for me, because I was actually seeing, in reality, that it was possible. And I felt like, oh my gosh, Dom told me, now I'm seeing it. And before that, I was kind of changing, I was switching between cross and open, and I was, trying to find myself. And now it's just the best way for me as well. And the fact that you're not playing the same things, it's not a matter of copying what you can already do with leading with the right side. It's about creating new things. It's about the new possibilities, the new grooves. And there's one chapter in open-handed playing, because we did not mention that Klaus wrote 2 amazing books with Dom, and there's a chapter talking about how you can play something leading with the right side and just change your position, but still playing the same patterns, and you create something completely new. So things like that. And I was also studying all the great drummers from years before I started playing, like Steve Gadd and of course Billy Cobham. But when I guess the first time I realized that, oh, this is so cool, I was like, this is amazing. It was Steve Gadd playing a song, open-handed playing, and he was mainly playing cross-sticking, but for that special song, he was playing open-handed. So if people like that, are using open-handed playing, especially for like cool ideas and to create something different, that's the way to go. So thank you very much, Dom, for this this amazing inspiration, and also Klaus. I mean, you guys are amazing, and the way you are pushing drumming and just keeping the tradition is something that we all do in a way, but trying to create new things is something that is also, it takes courage, because it's really hard to do, but you're doing it, and it's inspiring for me.
Absolutely. And one thing that really inspires me about you, Klaus, is that you have like your latest book on the going back at rudimental drumming, going to the early 1800s, I believe, and even probably before that, I think. Camp Drumming Update is the name, correct? It just came out?
Camp Duty Update, right?
Camp Duty Update, I'm sorry. And you have one foot firmly in the past, and you've obviously done huge amounts of homework investigating the amazing history of this instrument, but also 1 foot looking forward into the future. And I love that balance. I think we need to have that balance of sure, standing on the shoulders of giants and understanding the history, but also moving forward. So Stefan, I think you nailed it there, of having both the balance there. And I imagine when 50 Ways came out, that must have confounded every drummer on the planet, because there's no YouTube. You know, they're not seeing him play it. This is in the 70s, and they must have all ran to their drum set and tried to play it like this, and I said, oh, he's playing it with the left hand on the hi-hat.
And Steve is still using stuff like that also for newer songs. With I just saw him play recently with his organ trio, and before with James Taylor, and still he plays some of the newer songs with James Taylor still in the open-handed position, sometimes even match grip. So like on the October Road album, there's a couple of songs where he plays open-handed as well. And one sentence from Steve that still is kind of stuck in my mind was when he said, you know, it can turn out as a nice surprise sometimes if you put your left hand on the hi-hat. It was that's exactly the sentence he said. It can turn out as a nice surprise if you put your left hand on the hi-hat. And
Nice.
I mean, what a statement from a drumming genius like Steve, who is still, I mean, who I think he would consider himself being a cross-handed player, but to bring out some of the even more creative side of his drumming, he taps the sources of open-handed playing, which is a great lesson for anybody who is possibly not willing to change completely, but to look into the creative potential that this unique way of playing has. Even if you don't want to make the complete change, if a genius like Gadd does it for certain reasons, boy, why shouldn't anybody do? So
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe something I also can add is, if you learn to, let's say you're working on your jazz chops, and you're playing the jazz ride with the left hand, you're kind of teaching your left side to swing. So even if you use your right hand, you know, your left hand on the snare is going to swing much more. It's the same thing for grooves. I mean, if you learn to, you know, keep the hi-hat with the left hand, even when you're switching to the right side, because for me, it's not about just, you know, some people, they think that when you say open-handed playing, it means leading with the left side, but it actually means leading with both sides, and that's the magic of it. And for example, when I play grooves on my popcorn snare here, I'm still using my right hand to play the hi-hat, but I just never cross. And I can see people watching me when I play gigs, and they're kind of wondering what's happening. People are looking and they're like, so, and no, we the fact that we don't cross, it just gives us more options, but we lose nothing, and that's what I want like people to know. It's not something you lose; it's something you're adding.
Well, and look at what's happening. We have 5 different people from 4 different countries, 5 different cities, just on this conversation, discussing a concept, which means now it is of global acceptance that this is a wave of the future of modern drum set playing. Second point is Steve Smith, the great drummer from the band Journey and Vital Information, who's a phenomenal player, is playing match grip now, and his book Pathways of Motion speaks about playing more open-handed playing, where he's putting 2 ride cymbals on his drum set so he can see how his left hand moves like his right hand, because he feels if he marries those 2 positions comfortably together, that will open up opportunities of creativity. And he's now on the road with Journey performing, experimenting with this here. So here Steve is in his early 60s, still pushing the art form and still opening up doors of creativity, not only in his own playing, but setting the path for now hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people now on this recent tour with Journey are now witnessing Steve, and they're looking at Steve saying the same thing, Stefan, that you're saying. People are looking at you. What the hell is he doing?
yeah, that's a very good point. But even with Steve, if you remember, I mean, just like Steve Gadd, he had his little say open-handed excursus, so to speak.
Right.
With if you remember, Don't Stop Believing,
Is
it
open-handed?
Yeah.
it made us look differently at certain things.
So they didn't know that they were discovering this concept early on, but now it's like, well, I've been doing this for a while. And I leave tomorrow to fly to Arizona for a 10-day camp at Billy Cobham Retreat that has his full band working with many musicians, not just drummers, but guitar players, bass players, and keyboard players. We've got hundreds of musicians meeting at a university in Arizona, and we're going to spend 10 days together talking about playing the instrument and also playing music. It's now bringing these techniques into music. And so I'm going to spend 10 days with Cobham, and I know, even though I'm going there and I've known Billy for over 40 years, I still become a student of drumming by just being next to Billy, to witness him playing and to see how he utilizes his fingers, his wrists, and his arms in his playing, how he adapts it to get his sound in open-handed playing. So it's not like everybody who's open-handed playing starts to sound the same. If anything, as everyone adventures into open-handed playing, they all discover new levels of their playing and they all sound differently. This is really where the journey begins.
It's just like two fingerprints that are not alike. I think when you play open hand, you actually sound more like yourself instead of sounding, maybe like a carbon copy of some of the other drummers. I think more of your personality comes out. And I wanted to bounce an idea off of everybody here is one aspect of this is I love teaching. And when I played 17 years cross until about 2002. But I was teaching at the time, and I kind of thought, well, there's maybe no hope for me, but if someone's starting out on their first day of playing, I think they could have a big advantage playing open-handed. And then a couple of years later, I made the leap myself. But I started to teach people left hand on the hi-hat, but then when they went to the ride cymbal, they'd play with the right. And I started to wonder, like, man, am I kind of screwing people up, like giving them twice the amount of work, because I noticed they would get it one way, and then they would go to the other side, and it's a little bit more work at first. But what I noticed was very quickly the brain adapts. It's almost like maybe driving a car in America on one side and driving a car in Britain on the other side. And I think we underestimate our brains sometimes in how we can adapt and how we can grow. And what I started to see was my students, they got it super quickly. And I think a lot of educators out there, sometimes we fall into the trap of when we teach, it's like, well, I learned it this way, so I'm gonna pass on everything to you, almost my bad habits and maybe traditions that don't serve your creativity. So I would like to encourage all the educators out there to, even if yourself don't play like this, really give that gift of expression to your students. Is this something that you all see in your teaching?
Absolutely, because you never know. No matter if it's the 6-year-old little boy or girl who's sitting and having lessons with you, or the 60-year-old, and especially if you look at young students, you never know where their way will lead. Is it the next Buddy Rich that we have here, or is it the next whoever? And where can things lead if you show this guy really all the options that are out there in the game? So I think it would not be fair to hold back and say, you do this, and at a later point when we find out that you are one of the more talented guys, we make you switch to this. I'm not sure if that's a good choice. It's all about understanding your responsibility as a teacher and to give a student the tools where you can build up, and not at a certain place you have to come back and say, oh, now we have to reduce that because you gotta switch hands and start telling and start going back to a level where the student does not want to go. So I think that's not the way things work. For sure. Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Well, that's a great line, Klaus. And it's the responsibility to teaching and to education, but it's also the responsibility to the art form. If we're going to commit ourselves to push the art form, which means we have to push ourselves, that takes courage, that takes commitment, and that takes chance and risk. I mean, I was 48 when I made the commitment to make the change to open-handed playing. I had been playing for 37 years, cross-handed and traditional grip. I switched to match grip and open-handed, on that flight to Hamburg. I said, I'm making the change. I'm going to commit myself. And I said, if I'm true as a teacher telling students to push themselves, I must be the example of that. So when I got to that first event and there were 1,500 people at that show in Hamburg, I came out to the crowd and Klaus was there. And I came out and I said, listen, I got to tell you guys something. I'm not sure where I'm going, but I'm going to try something. But I'm going to try it in front of you. Wow. And then I told him about the books on Einstein I was reading. I told him about the flight coming over, the cutting of the hi-hat. And here I am right now. And I talked about this way of pushing ourselves to a level of if we challenge ourselves and commit ourselves to it, it's like once you cut that hi-hat, it's the story of the chicken and the pig, being totally committed once you cut it. The chicken and the pig, they're on the farm, and the chicken says to the pig, hey, man, let's make some breakfast together. So the pig says, well, gee, what do you want to cook for everybody? So the chicken says, ham and eggs. And the pig says, wait a second, you're involved, but I'm committed. That's what it takes. It takes, you got to be committed to leap into this with faith, which is the epitome of what the word faith is. I don't know what the answer is, but I believe there's something out there that's going to make this much better and give me more hope in the results of my artistic talent. When that happens, it becomes then that responsibility as an artist to then the responsibility as the educator. That when a student comes in, I might find somebody who might have that. If Casualty came to me and I was not playing open-handed, and I said, well, gee, you're playing that way, try playing this way. That might maybe solve some of the challenges you're having. I would be slowing down his learning process and putting obstacles where there are no obstacles. Well, that's not what education is about. It's about removing obstacles and opening up pathways of movement that will take us to a place that we have never experienced before. And I think that really is what this is about. That's why I said it. Not only is it a style of a drumming technique, but it is a philosophy of experimenting the pathway of where music and our talent can take us. That, to me, is the journey.
Absolutely. And it has. I also think it has a lot to do with the aspect that our instrument is still evolving to a certain degree. If you look at violin playing or piano playing, there pretty much is a methodology of how these instruments are taught since 200 or 300 years, because these instruments do not change anymore. But that is not true for modern drum set playing, as we are pretty much the only lucky guys who can arrange our instrument in the very personal way how we intend it to be. So,
and Steph's got two hi-hats on his left side. We're changing things around. I got a couple of rides. Klaus's setup is very different, as is a Casualty setup is different. And Chris, what you're experimenting right now is you're already experimenting with different setup, because now that your facility is getting even bigger, your creativity is saying, well, now that brings us to what you started before, Chris, which is the what if.
Yeah.
You know, the Fosbury story is in my book, is in my cycle book, The Cycle of Self-Empowerment. I use that story in there because this guy had the courage to change the way of leaping. The object was to get over the bar. They don't care how you get over the bar. You just got to get over the bar. So when he changed the technique, the bottom line is everyone said you're wrong until he got over the bar at the highest level. Then everyone said, wow, I want to learn that. That's what Cobham did. Cobham was the one that said, I'm going to keep on doing it. When Cobham leaped over the bar of drumming, everyone said, whoa, what is this guy doing? It's working. And that's when Simon followed. And now the world is changing. Here we are in the 16th year of the 21st century. And we're starting to see many people make this change. What's exciting is in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to start to see a wave of this happening. And we will be the leader of the educational part of what this is about. With Klaus's books on open-handed playing, that has opened the door of immense ideas of playing this way. The weaker side, when we put that together, opened up the concept of not only are we trying to strengthen our weaker hand, but now our weaker foot. When you bring your left foot to a higher level, oh my gosh, double bass playing and double pedal playing has gone to a whole nother level, especially with Steph and Klaus and Chris, what you're doing now. And Klaus was a single bass drum player. He started putting his techniques to his left foot, and holy mackerel, now he's playing rudimental patterns that are as crystal clear with 5s and 7s and 13-stroke rolls and flams and flam taps and all these different rudimental patterns as clearly with his feet as he is with his hands. Man, the freaking box has been opened. Bring it on.
I love it. And I always like to encourage people to at least have some percentage of your playing open-handed, even if it's 1%. We see like Steve Gadd, he's got maybe 10 to 15%. Steve Smith has now opened it up to 80 or 90%. When I started, it was like 1%. What I used to do was, I was kind of inspired by Mike Mangini, and I used to just 1 hour a week. It was Friday night, and I would just put my music on random, and I would just embrace the suck, as the expression goes, and just like all by myself, just play with my left hand lead. And I was doing it like 1 hour a week. And, you know, I noticed I was coming up with new ideas, and my weaker side was getting better. And it slowly increased to 100%. But all the people watching this, I think a lot of people might not go to 100% switch, but at least make it 1 to 5% to 10% to something of an open-handed playing to bring out your creativity and to work your weaker side. So this is fantastic. So we have to wrap things up, guys, but we have a bunch of questions. I'm just gonna choose a really good one here. How long did it take to become comfortable with the style of open-handed, filling the left-hand lead? That's a really common question with this. How long does it take?
Well, to be very honest, I cannot say, because I am still pushing the things to the limits. So if we look at things like I don't know, and any sort of standard rock, pop, funk, whatever drumming, I would say maybe from 93 to maybe, let's say, 96. I would say maybe like a good 2-year range. That was where I could do most of what I did before in the cross-handed position, again with the left hand. But I assume it might be less for some people, it might be much more for other people. It pretty much depends on your personal, say, physical skills and coordinative talent to a certain degree. But that was it, at least for me. But other than that, I'm still pushing things as far as I can, and I still consider myself a student of that issue. So and I hope I'll always be.
Don't think about comfort. Think about creativity, and let creativity enter into you. I mean, I'm still getting comfortable after you know, literally many years of doing this here. So it's still a growing process, but it's more about the creative process. Early on, when I first made the change, I started to feel creative differently at a high level. And I was more excited about the creative process than I was about the comfort zone. So I said, and the comfort in time, through muscle memory, that'll all get there. So I was too busy enjoying the creative uniqueness of what I was playing than I was worried about how did I feel comfort-wise. So I would say, you know, the focus is step into it and enjoy the journey that you're on more than how long will this take before I get to where I want to be. I'm going to turn 63 next month. I'm still not where I want to be with my drumming after over 51 years of me playing this instrument professionally. So that's part of the process.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think people are looking for something similar, but it will never be the same. Even if let's say at some point you get to the place where you can play left and right and it feels comfortable, but it will never really feel the same. And that's great, because let's say for some studio work, some producers, they hear the difference. And I was in the studio one time, and the producer just asked me to play open-handed, because when I was playing this way, it sounded a little bit different, and that was what he was looking for. So I would say comfortable. Do you mean the point where you can play the same thing? Well, I would say about, for me, a year. But like Dom said, I mean, just being in the process of growing and exploring the new possibilities, you know, that would be for me something that I will do for the rest of my life.
It's pretty much as if you read a good book for the second time, and of course you always wish you could read a good book just like again, just as if it was the first time. And we all know that this is not possible. But with open-handed playing, it's a little bit like that, because even if you had your years of experience in the cross-handed position and you now switch to open-handed, you kind of reinvent and rediscover your instrument with a totally different view to things, because you already know such a lot of stuff about the instrument, but now you're looking at from a different perspective, which makes you just discover new things.
Amazing. And that question, by the way, was from Shane Wickstead from Ireland. So we were talking about this being a worldwide thing. That is so cool that it really is a global thing happening right now with drumming. It's awesome.
From the USA to Vienna to Germany to Canada, it really opens up this path of where the future is going with modern drum set playing.
But isn't it exciting to feel yourself stretching your limits and going to the edge of your comfort zone and feeling a little bit of fear and frustration there, but knowing that, you know, the doors are just blown wide open? I really fell in love with that.
That's how I live my life in everything I do.
Yeah, exactly. And I talk a lot about the aspects in, you know, our lives that affect us as drummers and artists, and they're really one and the same thing. So I think the mental game of open-handed is just awesome. I mean, you're talking about courage, faith, embracing fear, having faith in your own uniqueness and self-expression. I think it's so cool. So there's so many parallels there. This is great.
And it's good to use the internet to research. I mean, even guys like Will Kennedy, Garibaldi has done some open-handed playing. There's so many players out there that have played this way. Kenny Arnold, so many guys that have done some things that have dabbled into it. And now with the power of the internet, anybody can go and just type in these names and do some research. And when you research these names and watch some video of them performing, don't just watch one video. Watch 20 different videos. So you see a cross playing of different times in their life on how they evolved. The information is out there. You just have to go and work and enjoy it.
And please go to chrislesso.com for more on this, klaushessler.com, domfamulero.com, stephanechamberlain.com. Look at all these books here. Open-Handed Playing, 1 and 2 by Klaus. It's Your Move by Dom Famulero. I love it. The Weaker Side by Stephan and Dom. These are all fantastic books, and there's more being made all the time. I want to close things with a great quote that I found. And this is actually an interview that I did with Dom in 2002 at COSA. And this was only a few weeks after Dom made the switch. I'm going to play you just a couple second clip of this. See if you can hear this.
If we're going to be honest to our talent and our career, we then should try to pursue the development of our weaker side. I could have never had the feet that I have now had I not focused on my left foot. Now I'm playing things I could have never imagined 10, 15 years ago. So I have to use that same hope that if I put this effort into what I'm doing now, what will happen in 5 or 10 years will be beyond my imagination now. What great will, and what a great personal constitution they have who want to challenge themselves. And they're wonderful players now, so they got past the hurdle. So I say, let's get past the hurdle. So now I've committed to the past 3 or 4 months ago to make that change. And I think that is the ultimate challenge of where the art form of modern drum set playing should be going in the 21st century. And those who do not make this change will retain the prehistoric techniques and the prehistoric obstacles with them forever.
So now we have the hindsight of it's almost 15 years later, and we're going into the next decades of this. It's amazing, isn't that? What's your thoughts on hearing that back, Dom, after 15 years?
I stand by what I said. I mean, it really is a matter of understanding that if our journey in life, the essence of life, if I ask someone the deepest question is, what is the essence of life? I'd have to answer that by saying, for me, it means to matter, to make a difference. If the time that we have on this planet, we are able to make a difference into one life, then I believe the essence of the value of how we've lived has been successful. Successful for me is not necessarily a financial gauge. Money does not motivate me. Can you make a difference? And in our little drumming world, if we are able to open up an artist by using a certain technique or inspiring someone to push themselves further, this really is the rewards of the value of our lives. So I stand by the fact of saying that someday we're going to look back at this podcast in the future when they look at this, and someone will be watching this from their little mobile device that might be on their glasses, and they're watching us talk about this here in the early part of the 21st century, and they're discovering the art form as valuable and as exciting as we did when we were younger, stepping into our first idea of playing drum set. Well, now as we push ourselves further, it's an exciting journey to see. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I see great hope in pushing this art form to a place that I probably cannot even imagine. And you guys are the next generation that's going to make this thing happen. You are the guys that are now in the driver's seat. You're pushing it forward. The harder you push yourself is the harder you push the art form. The harder you push the art form, the harder you push music. The harder you push music, the harder you push people to a higher level. That really is the journey of what we're doing here. That really is exciting.
Guys, thank you so much for inspiring, all the drummers around the world with this, and for sharing your journey with going open-handed. I think we have just started on this, and we're going to see what the next decades bring us in this journey, and inspiring others and having fun with it. This is about having fun. Let's not forget that, right?
Thank you so much. You did a great job, and I can easily see more future topics like this being discussed in the style of what you've done it. You've done a great, great job. Thanks for having myself and T here on the Long Island version, and it's great to see Klaus and Steph again, and yourself too, man. This is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Well, that was so much fun to talk to three of my favorite people, my inspirations, and just fantastic artists and human beings. Klaus Hessler, Stefan Chamberlain, Dom Famularo. Thank you so much for being a part of that, sharing your stories and inspiring drummers and people all around the world. This is just amazing. I have so many more great podcasts coming up, so please subscribe to the LTR podcast. Go to my website, chrislesso.com, rate the podcast, contact me, let me know what you think. I can't wait to meet you in person, over Skype, over media. I'm on all the social media, so anywhere you can, please connect with me. And these podcasts are about developing our self-expression through rhythm, through drumming, and also improving our character and who we are as human beings, and bulletproofing our mindset, and just getting a peak mindset and mental state where we can go through life and become the best versions of ourselves we can be. And boy, do I feel in gratitude and lucky to know so many great people, and to be able to do this every day, to be able to drum and to be able to help people and inspire people. It's amazing. So contact me and let me know what you think. I hope to see you for the next podcast. Keep playing with passion, practice every day, become the best version of yourself that you can, inspire and help others, and I will see you very soon for the next podcast. Take care until then.